the 17th century. Europe buzzed with change. Amidst these shifting tides, the Dutch Republic rose. Modest in size, but with an unwavering spirit. Their commitment to free trade laid the foundation for a golden age. Amsterdam, once a modest trading port, blossomed into a bustling metropolis, its streets paved with gold, its canals teeming with ships laden with exotic goods. The Dutch East India Company, or VOC, symbolized their ambition. What began as a purely commercial enterprise gradually morphed into something more complex, more ambitious, an empire. However, the VOC's growing power and influence sowed the seeds of a different kind of transformation. Their trading posts, initially established for purely commercial purposes, evolved into centers of political and military power. The VOC, with its private army and navy, found itself increasingly embroiled in local conflicts, vying for control of resources and territory. From the Spice Islands of Indonesia to the coastal regions of Africa and the Americas, the Dutch footprint expanded, leaving an indelible mark on the cultures and destinies of the people they encountered. This transition from traders to colonizers, though driven by profit, carried profound consequences. The Dutch, once celebrated for their entrepreneurial spirit and commitment to free trade, were now entangled in the complex web of colonialism, its inherent contradictions and lasting legacies. The line between commerce and conquest blurred, setting the stage for a new chapter in Dutch history, one marked by both triumphs and tragedies, prosperity and exploitation. The Dutch East India Company, or VOC, was more than just a business. It was an empire in the making. Founded in 1602, the VOC represented a new breed of commercial enterprise. Unlike traditional trading ventures, it operated with a level of autonomy and power previously unheard of. Backed by the full might of the Dutch government, the VOC could establish colonies, raise armies, and negotiate treaties with foreign rulers. This unprecedented authority stemmed from the VOC's unique structure. It wasn't a single entity, but a collection of chambers, each representing a different Dutch city, pooling their resources and expertise. This decentralized system allowed for greater flexibility and risk-taking, fueling the company's rapid expansion. The VOC's primary goal was simple: to secure a monopoly on the lucrative spice trade with the East Indies. Spices like nutmeg, cloves, and pepper, coveted for their culinary and medicinal properties, were worth their weight in gold in European markets. To achieve its objective, the VOC built a network of trading posts and fortifications stretching from the Cape of Good Hope to Japan. These outposts served as vital links in the company's vast trading empire, facilitating the flow of spices, silks, porcelain, and other exotic goods back to Europe. The VOC's ships, renowned for their speed and efficiency, plied the treacherous waters of the Indian Ocean, outmaneuvering rivals and establishing Dutch dominance over key trade routes. Their success was built on a foundation of technological innovation, skilled seamanship, and a ruthless determination to crush competition. This relentless pursuit of profit, however, came at a cost. The VOC's methods, often characterized by exploitation, violence, and displacement of indigenous populations, cast a dark shadow over their golden age. In the 17th century, spices weren't just culinary additions, they were luxury goods and status symbols. The allure of spices like nutmeg, cloves, and pepper stemmed from their scarcity and exotic origins. These treasures from the Indonesian archipelago captivated the European imagination. Spices were believed to possess medicinal properties, warding off illness. The Dutch East India Company pursued a spice monopoly, navigating perilous waters and complex politics. The Dutch, recognizing the immense value of these spices, sought to control their production and trade. They established plantations and trading posts in the Spice Islands, employing a mix of diplomacy, coercion, and violence to secure their monopoly. The Banda Islands, in particular, became the scene of brutal conflict as the Dutch sought to eliminate competition and control the production of nutmeg. The quest for these prized spices drove the Dutch to explore uncharted territories, engage in fierce competition with rival European powers, and ultimately to establish a vast and lucrative trading empire. The story of nutmeg, cloves, and pepper is an example of the power of these seemingly small and insignificant commodities to shape the course of history. The Dutch East India Company established trading posts throughout Asia to dominate the spice trade. These outposts facilitated the flow of spices and other goods from east to west. Batavia, now Jakarta, was a key hub established in 1619. It became the center of VOC operations in Asia. Dejima in Nagasaki was another crucial post, active from 1641 to 1853. It was the sole point of contact between Japan and the West. The Dutch traded for Japanese silver, copper, and other goods. Smaller posts were also established along the coasts of India and Southeast Asia. These outposts collected spices, textiles, and other commodities. The Dutch used diplomacy, alliances, and force to dominate Asian trade. The legacy of these posts continues to shape many Asian nations today. The Dutch East India Company's relentless pursuit of a spice monopoly had a profound and often devastating impact on the economies and societies of the regions it sought to control. While the VOC's activities brought immense wealth to the Dutch Republic, this prosperity came at a steep price for many indigenous communities. The VOC implemented policies that often led to exploitation, displacement, and environmental degradation. One of the most significant consequences of the VOC's spice monopoly was the disruption of traditional trade networks and practices. The VOC's control over the production and distribution of spices meant that local farmers and traders were often forced to sell their goods at artificially low prices, undermining their livelihoods and disrupting long-established economic systems. The VOC's focus on cash crops like nutmeg and cloves often came at the expense of food production, leading to shortages and, in some cases, famine. The VOC's pursuit of profit also fueled conflict and violence. In the Banda Islands, the Dutch waged a brutal campaign to secure control over nutmeg production, massacring and enslaving much of the indigenous population. This pattern of violence and exploitation became a hallmark of the VOC's operations and cast a long shadow over the Dutch colonial legacy. The VOC's impact on the environment was equally profound. The establishment of large-scale spice plantations led to deforestation, soil erosion, and the introduction of non-native species, disrupting delicate ecosystems. The VOC's pursuit of short-term profits came at the expense of long-term sustainability, leaving a legacy of environmental degradation that continues to plague many parts of Southeast Asia today. The story of the Dutch spice trade serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked economic ambition and the enduring consequences of colonialism. While the Dutch East India Company was busy in the East Indies, another chapter of Dutch colonialism was unfolding across the Atlantic. In 1609, Henry Hudson navigated a river that would later bear his name, the Hudson River. Hudson's quest for a northwest passage opened a new frontier for Dutch exploration, New Netherland. The Hudson River, rich in resources, was inhabited by diverse Native American tribes. The river offered a strategic waterway for trade, connecting the interior with the Atlantic coast. The Dutch West India Company, established in 1621, was granted a charter to develop New Netherland. Fort Orange and New Amsterdam became vital trading posts, marking the beginning of Dutch settlements. From its humble beginnings as a small trading post, New Amsterdam, modern-day New York, evolved into a vibrant and cosmopolitan settlement. Dutch settlers, seeking new opportunities, mingled with French Huguenots, English dissenters, German Lutherans, and Sephardic Jews, all drawn to New Amsterdam's promise of freedom and opportunity. This diverse mix created a unique social fabric characterized by tolerance and pragmatism. New Amsterdam's growth depended on interactions with the native Lenape people, marked by both cooperation and conflict. Trade, particularly the fur trade, formed a cornerstone of their interactions. The story of New Amsterdam is one of cultural exchange, conflict, and enduring legacies that shape New York City today. In New Netherland, it was the allure of fur that drove the colony's early economy. The forests and rivers of the Hudson River Valley teemed with fur-bearing animals, highly prized in European markets. The Dutch established trading posts and alliances with Native American tribes to secure access to this valuable commodity. Fort Orange became a hub for the fur trade, with Dutch traders offering European goods in exchange for furs. The fur trade brought considerable wealth to the Dutch, but also led to overhunting and conflicts between Native American tribes. The introduction of European goods transformed Native American societies, creating dependencies and social disruptions. The fur trade serves as a microcosm of Dutch-Native American relations in New Netherland, a story of economic exchange and unintended consequences. Despite its early promise, New Netherland's days as a Dutch colony were numbered. The English, with their expanding colonies, viewed New Netherland as a strategic prize. In 1664, English King Charles II granted the territory to his brother, the Duke of York. The English naval force demanded the surrender of the colony, and Peter Stuyvesant reluctantly complied. New Amsterdam was renamed New York, ending Dutch rule in North America. The Dutch East India Company recognized the strategic importance of the Cape of Good Hope. Situated at the southern tip of Africa, it controlled the vital sea route between Europe and Asia. In 1652, Jan van Riebeck established a refreshment station for the VOC fleet. This marked the beginning of a permanent European presence at the Cape. The Cape's strategic location, fertile soil, and temperate climate made it an attractive destination for settlers. What began as a logistical necessity evolved into a colony with far-reaching consequences for the region and its indigenous inhabitants. The initial Dutch settlement at the Cape focused on fulfilling the needs of the VOC fleet. As more ships arrived, the idea of establishing a permanent colony took root. In 1657, the VOC granted land to employees to establish farms, marking a turning point. The arrival of free burghers brought them into contact with the indigenous Khoikhoi people. The Dutch sought to incorporate the Khoikhoi into their economic system, often through coercion. The seeds of a racially divided society were sown in these early decades of the colony's existence. Dutch settlers at the Cape began to push eastward, expanding beyond the VOC's control. This expansion brought them into conflict with the Khoikhoi people, leading to the Khoikhoi-Dutch Wars. The Khoikhoi initially resisted, but the Dutch, with superior weaponry, gradually gained the upper hand. The wars had a devastating impact on the Khoikhoi, decimating their populations and dispossessing them of their lands. The Dutch expansion also brought them into contact with other African groups, leading to further conflicts. Central to this trajectory was the introduction of slavery. As the colony expanded, the VOC turned to the transatlantic slave trade to meet labor demands. Enslaved Africans were brought to the Cape to work on Dutch farms and vineyards. The legacy of slavery provided a framework for the later development of apartheid. The Dutch West India Company turned its attention to the Americas, particularly the Caribbean. The Dutch established colonies and plantations throughout the Caribbean, focusing on sugar cultivation. Thousands of enslaved Africans were transported to work on sugar plantations under grueling conditions. The Dutch Caribbean became a melting pot of cultures, blending European, African, and indigenous traditions. The Gold Coast drew the Dutch due to its abundance of gold deposits. Elmina Castle became a major center for the Dutch slave trade. The Dutch gradually became embroiled in the transatlantic slave trade to supply labor for sugar plantations. Thousands of Africans were captured, imprisoned, and shipped across the Atlantic under horrific conditions. The Dutch presence on the Gold Coast had a profound impact on the region's political and social dynamics. The legacy of Dutch colonialism in the Caribbean, Gold Coast, and Cape of Good Hope is marked by both the brutality of slavery and the resilience of the human spirit. The echoes of this history continue to resonate in the region today, highlighting the need for social justice and historical reckoning. The Dutch East India Company's pursuit of a spice monopoly in the East Indies, while economically successful, came at a heavy human and environmental cost. The VOC, driven by a relentless pursuit of profit, employed ruthless tactics to secure control over the production and trade of spices like nutmeg, cloves, and pepper. In the Banda Islands, the Dutch, through a combination of military force, displacement, and forced labor, decimated the indigenous Bandanese population. transforming the once thriving islands into a cautionary tale of colonial greed. The VOC's impact on the East Indies extended beyond the Banda Islands. In Java, the company established a foothold in Batavia, present-day Jakarta, gradually expanding its control over the island and transforming it into a center of coffee and sugar production. The Dutch, employing a system of forced labor and exploitative taxation, extracted immense wealth from Java, enriching themselves while impoverishing the local population. The VOC's pursuit of profit also had a significant environmental impact. The establishment of large-scale plantations, coupled with the VOC's disregard for sustainable practices, led to deforestation, soil erosion, and the depletion of natural resources. The environmental degradation caused by the VOC's activities continues to have repercussions in the region today, a stark reminder of the long-term consequences of short-sighted colonial policies. Beyond economic exploitation, Dutch colonialism in Indonesia also involved significant administrative control. The Dutch established a complex bureaucracy to manage their colonies, often employing local elites to enforce their policies. The Dutch influence is still visible in Indonesia today, from the architecture in cities like Jakarta to the legal and educational systems that were shaped during the colonial period. Despite the oppressive regime, resistance against Dutch rule was persistent. Various uprisings and movements eventually culminated in Indonesia's struggle for independence in the 20th century. The legacy of Dutch colonialism in Indonesia is complex, marked by both the scars of exploitation and the resilience of its people. The Dutch Empire, though primarily defined by its holdings in the East and West Indies and the Caribbean, also extended its reach to other corners of the globe. In South Asia, the VOC established a presence in Ceylon, present-day Sri Lanka, capturing the island from the Portuguese in the 17th century. The Dutch, drawn to the island's strategic location and its lucrative cinnamon trade, transformed Ceylon into a major center for cinnamon production, exploiting the labor of the indigenous population to fuel their economic ambitions. Across the Atlantic, the Dutch made a brief but impactful foray into South America. In the 17th century, the VOC established a colony in what is now northeastern Brazil, with Recife as its capital. The Dutch, seeking to replicate their success in the sugar industry, established sugar plantations and engaged in the transatlantic slave trade, bringing thousands of enslaved Africans to work on their plantations. However, their hold on Brazil proved to be tenuous, and they were eventually expelled by Portuguese forces. These ventures, though geographically dispersed and ultimately less enduring than their other colonial endeavors, demonstrate the global reach of Dutch ambition during this era. Driven by a combination of economic self-interest, a thirst for adventure, and a belief in their own superiority, the Dutch left their mark on the world, for better or for worse. The Dutch Republic's meteoric rise to prominence in the 17th century was inextricably linked to its mastery of the seas. The Dutch Navy, once a ragtag collection of armed merchant vessels, transformed into a formidable force, capable of projecting Dutch power across the globe. Protecting the vast and lucrative trade routes established by the Dutch East and West India Companies became the Navy's paramount mission. The Dutch understood that their economic prosperity hinged on their ability to safeguard the flow of goods between Europe and their far-flung colonies in Asia, Africa, and the Americas. Their ships, laden with spices, silks, sugar, and other valuable commodities, faced constant threats from pirates, privateers, and rival European powers, eager to seize a share of the lucrative trade. To counter these threats, the Dutch invested heavily in building a powerful and technologically advanced navy. Unlike other European navies, which often relied on large, heavily armed warships designed for traditional naval battles, the Dutch favored a more agile and versatile fleet. Their ships, while still equipped with cannons, were designed for speed and maneuverability, allowing them to outrun or outmaneuver larger opponents. This emphasis on speed and agility reflected the Dutch understanding of naval warfare as an extension of their commercial endeavors. Their goal was not necessarily to engage in prolonged battles for control of the seas, but rather to protect their merchant fleets, disrupt enemy trade, and secure access to vital ports and waterways. The Dutch Navy, therefore, became a vital instrument for safeguarding the economic engine that fueled the Dutch Golden Age. The Dutch Republic's dominance in global trade led to conflict with England. The 17th century saw a series of naval wars between these two powers, These Anglo-Dutch wars had a profound impact on the balance of power in Europe. The First War erupted over commercial rivalries and navigation rights. The English sought to break the Dutch hold on trade. One of the most significant battles was the Battle of Scheveningen in 1653. The Treaty of Westminster in 1654 ended the First War, but tensions remained high. These clashes solidified the Dutch Republic's position as a dominant maritime power, influencing global trade for decades. By the late 17th century, the Dutch Republic began to show signs of strain. The relentless pursuit of profit and the constant need to defend its vast trading empire took a toll. The Dutch East India Company, or VOC, became a victim of its own success. Corruption, inefficiency, and overextension plagued the company's operations. The costs of maintaining trading posts and waging wars drained the VOC's coffers. England emerged as a formidable naval power, eager to challenge Dutch dominance. Internally, the Dutch faced growing discontent among their own people, who were burdened by high taxes and economic instability. Externally, the Dutch Republic was also under pressure from other European powers, such as France, which sought to expand their own territories. These combined internal and external pressures ultimately weakened the Dutch Empire, leading to its gradual decline. The 18th century witnessed a dramatic shift in the global balance of power, one that would have profound consequences for the Dutch Republic. The rise of new land-based empires, particularly those of England and France, presented a formidable challenge to their dominance. England established itself as the preeminent naval power. The British East India Company aggressively expanded its trading empire in Asia, challenging Dutch dominance in the spice trade. France, under Louis XIV, also posed a significant threat to Dutch interests. French colonial presence in the Americas and the Caribbean put pressure on Dutch territories and trade routes. The Dutch now faced a new reality, a world order dominated by large, centralized empires. Their days of global dominance were fading. The decline of the Dutch Empire was a gradual erosion of power and influence. The Dutch Empire left an indelible mark on the world, its legacy a complex tapestry of trade, exploitation, cultural exchange, and resistance. The Dutch Empire was a maritime affair, built on trade and driven by profit. Through the Dutch East and West India Companies, they established a vast trading network. In Asia, the Dutch East India Company's pursuit of a spice monopoly had profound and often devastating consequences. In Africa, the Dutch presence at the Cape of Good Hope had a particularly tragic impact. The legacy of apartheid continues to cast a long shadow over South Africa. In the Americas, the Dutch played a significant role in the transatlantic slave trade. Enslaved Africans and their descendants forged new cultural identities, blending African traditions with European and indigenous influences. The Dutch engaged in slavery, exploitation, and violence. They displaced populations and disrupted economies. The shadows of this past continue to linger. The Netherlands grappled with its colonial past with nostalgia, denial, and reluctance to acknowledge its dark side. The Dutch Empire's legacy continues to shape the world today. A growing movement calls for a more honest examination of the country's colonial legacy. Historians, activists, and descendants demand recognition of the atrocities committed. Museums re-examine collections, acknowledging exploitative circumstances. In 2020, King Willem-Alexander expressed deep regret for the Netherlands' role in slavery. The journey of confronting its colonial past is ongoing, requiring introspection, dialogue, and reconciliation. Its echoes resonate in cultural landscapes and economic disparities. Understanding its rise and fall offers insights into colonialism's impact. History is a dynamic force shaping our present and future. Colonial legacies fuel conflicts and exacerbate inequalities. The Netherlands is engaging in introspection and reconciliation. This process is essential for a just and equitable future. Acknowledging colonialism's consequences and dismantling systemic inequalities is crucial. Studying history invites critical reflection and challenges dominant narratives. Our actions can ripple through time, impacting generations to come. Understanding the Dutch experience can guide us towards a more just future.